Okay, this is chapter 12, the first lecture. I might be able to get the whole thing in chapter 12. Um, Assessment is a big part of teaching. I want you to know, one reason went to chapter 12 is because to understand how I'm assessing you and for your grade. Assessment is made up of two things: measurement and evaluation. I much prefer measurement because that's objective, whereas evaluation is subjective. Measurement is a collection and recording of data. It's a score. It measures quantity. So on the first quiz we took, you made a 17. That's a measurement. Evaluation is informative and it's intuitive judgment and it measures quality. It's a grade, it's some type of scale. So I said 17 was the highest B. So I'm adding a evaluation to that. For instance, those of you who are equestrians, you know the 100 jumpers. Um, uh, when you are just doing all the jumps, the amount of time it takes, how many things you knock over, all those are measurements. If you're doing equitation, then we have what we call evaluation because we have somebody that's telling you if you're doing a good job or not doing a good job. Um, the use of a test is to determine whether the student has learned what he intended to learn. That's measurement. Deciding whether the student learned well is evaluation. Now, there's formal assessments and informal assessments in a classroom. Formal assessment is some kind of test or quiz to decide if the student has learned. Informal is gather information how well a student is doing during the course of instruction. So a formal would be the quiz at the end. A informal would be some of those little handouts I give you that you take, and I can see if you're understanding that concept or not. Now, the two biggest factors in measurement are validity and reliability. Validity is, does it measure what it tends to measure? That's the most important characteristic. Does a math test measure the math? Does a personality test measure your personality? Does a chapter 1 quiz actually measure what you learn in chapter 1? Now, there's 7 types of validity. We don't really care, but one validity I want you to know is content validity. Content validity says that the student has access. They're not saying you know the information. You have access to the answer through your notes, your textbook. You cannot ask a question on a test if the student does not have access to the answer. So sometimes you see, where did this question come from? If you find those questions should be tossed out. But if you can, the teacher can point to a lecture or to a handout or to the textbook, then it has content validity. The other is reliability. Reliability is is consistency. In Ed Psych, I have 2 tests when we're in normal things because you're sitting so close together. And if you took A test or B test, I assume it's reliable. I would assume you get the same score. It's just like IQ test. All of you take an IQ test if you're American, and obviously a lot of foreigners too. But you have an IQ score, and you probably only take it once in your lifetime. Why? Because we think IQ is highly reliable. So why keep giving it and take the time and the money when you're going to get the same score? Not exactly the same score, but you're going to fall in the same quadrant. Um, so now, the thing that you want to remember is a test can be reliable, but and not valid. You know, I could give you a test. There's nothing on chapter 1, and then I give you a makeup test with nothing on chapter 1. You get the same grade, super reliable, but not valid. However, if a test is valid, it is reliable. You can have reliability without validity, but not validity without reliability. Now, one of the things that we talk about is the difference between subjective and objective type testing. For instance, an essay is subjective. A multiple choice test is objective. And I'm going to go through some things about the differences, and you know these already, but I'll go through them very quickly. Essay tests test higher learning, analysis, and synthesis. You can test higher learning through objective tests, but it's much harder. It's much more difficult. I think I do test higher learning because I do application test questions, but essay tests are much easier to test higher learning. Essay tests have less range. By less range, they cover less material. What I mean is, you can do the 5 causes of the Civil War, and so there's a lot of stuff you learned in the Civil War thing that's not on the test. An objective test, if it's done right, it shotguns everything, so you cover everything that you covered. If you look at the 2 tests that I have in Ed Psych, A and B, you will notice that everything is covered in your notes, your textbook, and stuff on the test. Essay tests are divergent. Multiple choice tests or objective tests are convergent. What I mean by that is divergent means an essay test, you can write anything. If I say, tell me about E.L. Thorndike, and you say, well, I like chocolate. Okay, that has nothing to do with the answer, but you can be very creative in your response. On an objective test, you got to pick out the correct answer. So it's convergent. There's only one answer. In an essay, you can kind of go around it or, talk about anything or tie things together. It's much easier to develop an essay test. You just come up with a question. Whereas it's difficult to make up a good objective test. On the other hand, it's easier to score an objective test. That's one reason I use them. You can go through very fast. Where an essay test, you have to read everything, and it takes a lot longer. So you pay at the end on essay, objective, you pay in the beginning. Objective tests are more reliable. That's because there's more measurement than evaluation. On a essay test, there's other factors that are involved: handwriting, grammar, neatness. Which are not affected on the objective test. Also, we have things like the halo effect, which is very strong on subjective. The halo effect is the first impression carries over. So if you do really well on the first test, the teacher thinks you're an A student. If you do very poorly, the teacher thinks you're a terrible student. So on the next test, if it's essay, the teacher may give you a little break because, this person's smart, I'm having a bad day, I'll give them. Whereas all of a sudden you're doing well, the teacher goes, what's that? Where is this coming from? Because this student is not a good student. So the halo effect is very important in subjective measures. I told the class that I took a class in American institutions, and it's basically U.S. history course, but at Florida they had to have a different name to it. So it was essay, and I studied super hard because I was a psych major. I knew this super hard, and I got an A on the first essay test. The next one, I didn't study as hard, and I had a couple of essay questions. I really didn't know the answer. So my penmanship is so bad that I wrote that, and the teacher honestly said, Julian, I can't read this, but I know you know what you're talking about. That's because of the halo effect. And also we talked about in class about a U. That's how grades are on essays. The first couple essays are always the highest grade, then it gets lower, lower, lower till it gets to the bottom. And then the teacher goes, oh my God, these scores are too low. And then it goes up. So if you're an essay per test, you want your test to be graded first or last. Essay tests, there's less cheating. Man, how you cheat on an essay? You have to read the whole thing or look over the person's back. Finally, objective tests, there are more test wisdom because some people know how to take a test. Some people can look at a question and figure out how to make it and get the correct answer. For instance, like 72% of all questions, the longest one is the right answer. So if you don't have an idea what it is, circle the longest one. Or if you have two opposites, one of them has to be right. C is not the best answer. B, C, and D are most common, and teachers have a preference. So you should look if the first couple that you know are B's, when you come to a question you don't know, then go with B because the teachers kind of got that influence on that. Then the next thing I want to talk about is 4 simple test measurements, statistics here. I'll go through these because you already know these. Range, the difference between the lowest and highest score. Mean is the average of all the test scores. So you would, if you had 10 people in class, you would add up all their scores and divide by 10 and get the mean. But the mean is affected by high or low scores. One thing I mentioned in class was salaries. For instance, in football, you may have a quarterback making $35 million a year, and the offensive lineman's making less than $1 million. But if you add all that together, it looks like everybody's making $10, $12 million. Median is the middle number. So if you have 5, you put them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll be the third number. If it's even numbers, it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4. You would add 3 and 4 2 and 3 together and divide by 2. But on the test, I'm just going to give you an odd because it's easier. And then the mode is the most common score. I don't give you those things when you take a test because I'm going to explain why that in a second. Because a test can be used 2 different ways. It's not the test that determines this, it's the faculty member. Either it's norm referenced. Norm means that your grade is affected by other people in class. So if we're on a bell curve, 4% get A's, 4 flunk, 14% get B's, 14% get D's, 64% get C's. So norm reference, like ACT, SAT, those things are affected by how other people do. So it's based on comparison of students. Criterion-based is what we do in this class. That's why I don't give you any statistical measures because it doesn't matter. Criterion-based is your judge on yourself. You're not affected. Everybody in class could get an A. Not going to happen. Everybody in class could flunk. Either that's not going to happen. But the fact is that whatever you do has nothing to do with what the person next to you does. Now, one of the pluses of Criterion is that students can help other students because they're not affected by the grade. But, and it also increases cheating. Whereas norm, less cheating because if somebody does better than you, that pulls you down. And you don't help other students because it may hurt your grade. So that is chapters 12 in a nutshell. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.